School choice. President Trump visits a Florida Catholic school, signaling the focus of his education agenda.
Touting school choice, President Donald Trump arrives in Orlando, Florida to visit St. Andrew Catholic School. We'll tell you what he said to Catholic students and teachers.
A conservative approach.
What I'm suggesting is that the administration needs to rethink its commitment not to touch entitlements.
Leading conservative Arthur Brooks tells us what the president needs to do to protect our kids and grandkids. And living the Lenten season.
Di digiuno, di preghiera.
Pope Francis explains how to truly fast this Lent on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, March 3rd, 2017. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jason Calvi in for Lauren Ashburn. President Donald Trump visits St. Andrew Catholic School in Florida. He's praising it as an ideal place for disadvantaged children, and his tour is sending a clear signal that his education agenda will focus on school choice. EWTN News Nightly correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from Orlando, where he's covering the president's visit. Wyatt?
Jason, this is Donald Trump's first visit to a school since he became president and since his address to Congress, in which he notably said education is the civil rights issue of our time. The President Trump spent over 2 hours here at St. Andrew Catholic School in Orlando, along with his Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, a strong supporter of charter schools and vouchers. They dropped in on a fourth grade classroom, greeting teachers, students, and parents. Trump also sat in on the session of parent-teacher conferences and praised the bishop's emphasis on education.
Your support of schools like St. Andrew's Catholic School has been incredible. Everyone talks about it. They talk about you. You understand how much the students benefit from full education, one that enriches both the mind and the soul.
I spoke with one high school student who was included in a roundtable conversation with the president about why her Catholic education has been so important.
So everyone at Tampa Catholic has a religion class, and they teach us more about God, and they help us develop a closer relationship with Him, which is important. So I've gotten closer with God. I pray every day.
The president's choice of this school is significant. 295 of 350 students at St. Andrew benefit from the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship, a program which grants financial help to students from low-income households. The president's visit seemed to have resonated with the wider Florida Catholic community as well. As you saw there in that interview, we saw people, teachers, parents, and students from across the state, not just Orlando, come here and want to participate in that roundtable with the president and his team. Jason?
What do you think were the president's goals in visiting this school?
Well, if you remember, Jason, during his speech Tuesday, the president had asked legislators to fund a bill that would support school choice, specifically for disadvantaged youth and minority children. That seems to be the emphasis here, and he wanted to be here specifically at St. Andrew to emphasize and underscore how big of a goal that is for the administration.
All right, Wyatt Goolsby for us in Orlando. Thank you, Wyatt. And teachers' unions are critical of the president's visit to that Catholic school, saying it shows hostility toward public schools. The American Federation of Teachers is even calling it an ideological crusade. I talked to Gerard Robinson, the former head of education in Virginia and in Florida, and a Trump transition advisor who's responding tonight.
Well, President Trump was pretty clear that he supports parental choice. And there are thousands of parents in the state of Florida who believe that using their money and public tax dollars to support a school that works for their children is important. But let's remember, this is the same union who not too long ago was suing to stop the federal tax credit program in Florida, which is helping over 70,000 students. So for them, the fact that they would use crusade, I think, is inappropriate when you're talking about a religious school. But more importantly, let's be tolerant about the rights of parents to choose where they want to send their children.
There's 129,000 schools in the whole country. So I'm just wondering, why do you think that the president picked this Catholic school to visit first?
Well, Catholic schools are the largest amongst all private schools in the United States. They've got over a century of work educating students not only in rural areas, but also in urban areas. And so it makes sense to go to a school where there seems to be actually a good track record. But more importantly, he's committing to a promise he made earlier to support all kids in different settings. We both know the majority of our children will be in public schools, and we have to make sure they work. but we also have to make sure that we support options outside of the public schools. And by going to a Catholic school, he made good on the promise.
In this particular school the president visited is predominantly African American. What do vouchers and other school choice options mean for minorities?
Well, if you take a look at research, whether it's from the Phi Delta Kappan poll, or whether it's from Education Next or Pathways.gov, African American parents, over 60%, agree that vouchers, tax credits, and other forms of choice are important. That's number one. Number two, if you're talking about African Americans, they've been a part of the Catholic school tradition for a very long time. I'm a Catholic school graduate, as well as many members of my family. So Catholics, urban education, African Americans, it's not new. What may be new is the use of, is a use of tax credits in a state like Florida to advance opportunity and equity.
The critics, they say students with disabilities are going to be left behind when we implement school choice across the nation. What do you say to that?
Well, two things. Number one, on the public school side in Florida, there are actually charter schools in that state set up primarily to deal with students who have special needs. Number two, there are private schools in Florida set up to deal specifically with students with special needs. Some of those are nonprofit and some of those are for-profit. But one big misconception about public education is that public schools educate all special needs students. That's absolutely incorrect. But it's just another politically motivated misconception to make people believe that anything that's public going to private will lead to mayhem. And that's just not true.
Well, it's certainly something you know very well. You were the Secretary of Education in Florida and in Virginia. Thank you so much, Gerard Robinson, fellow at the American Enterprise Institute.
Thank you.
And President Trump invited a Florida student to his speech to Congress this week. Denisha Merriweather used Florida's scholarship program to go to a private high school that she says turned her life around. She was also with the president today. And President Trump defends his attorney general, who's in the midst of a flurry of controversy. Jeff Sessions announced yesterday he'll recuse himself from any Justice Department investigations into links between Trump aides and Russia during the 2016 election. And the president tweeted a 4-part statement which reads, "Jeff Sessions is an honest man. He did not say anything wrong. He could have stated his response more accurately, but it was clearly not intentional. This whole narrative is a way of saving face for Democrats losing an election that everyone thought they were supposed to win. The Democrats are overplaying their hand. They lost the election, and now they have lost their grip on reality. The real story is all of the illegal leaks of classified and other information. It is a total witch hunt." And it's not unusual for a member of Congress to meet with a foreign ambassador, but congressional contact with Russian officials has been limited due to Moscow's close relationship with Syria. The president is hitting back at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer over his own ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The president tweeted a photo of Schumer meeting with Putin back in 2003. President Trump called for a probe into Schumer's ties to Russia and Putin. Schumer tweeted a reply saying he'd happily talk. He then challenged Trump to do the same. The vice president used a private email account for public business while he was Indiana's governor. The Indy Star also says Pence's AOL account was hacked last year. Pence's contacts were sent an email falsely claiming the governor and his wife were stranded in the Philippines and needed money. Pence's office says he followed the Indiana law. And Vice President Mike Pence joins Health Secretary Tom Price and House Speaker Paul Ryan as they meet with small business owners in Janesville, Wisconsin, Ryan's hometown. Pence told the invitation-only crowd that Obamacare nightmare is about to end.
Despite the best efforts of some activists at town hall meetings around the country, the truth of the matter is the American people know. Obamacare has failed, and Obamacare must go.
The three leaders made it clear the White House wants other Republicans to work with House leadership to replace Obamacare. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen signals the Fed will start raising interest rates again. It would reflect a strengthening job market. Yellen said in a speech today that the Fed expects steady economic improvement to justify additional rate increases. Policymakers will review the possible rise at a meeting March 14th. And police make an arrest on threats made against Jewish schools. The man behind bars is a former journalist fired on charges of making up stories. Juan Thompson was arrested in St. Louis. Police say he's behind at least 8 of the scores of threats to Jewish centers nationwide. They say the threats were part of a plan to intimidate a woman after Thompson's relationship with her ended. Police are still looking into the other threats. And other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Thousands of people escape Mosul as Iraqi forces move in on ISIS. Around 7,000 people left a neighborhood to the north of the city as the fight rages on. Iraqi forces launched an attack against ISIS on the western part of Mosul nearly 2 weeks ago. Since then, more than 28,000 people have fled the fighting. And Irish investigators find a mass grave with the remains of babies and children. It's on the site of a former Catholic orphanage in Ireland. The finding confirms a local historian's work to trace the fates of 800 children who died at the home for mothers and babies in County Galway. DNA finds the ages of the dead range from 35 weeks to 3 years old. All buried in the 1950s, the home closed back in 1961. It was one of more than a dozen in Ireland offering shelter to orphans, unwed mothers, and their children. And Pope Francis and Vatican leaders are going on retreat this Sunday. The annual 5-day Lenten retreat will take place 20 miles outside Rome. Our Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin gives us a preview tonight.
Pope Francis will head to the nearby town of Aricia on Sunday with a group of Vatican officials. The Holy Father has chosen this house run by the Pauline Fathers overlooking Lake Albano to pray and reflect. Leading the retreat this year is Franciscan Father Giulio Michelini, a biblical scholar who teaches at the Theological Institute of Assisi. When asked to lead the retreat, Father Giulio told Pope Francis that there were other priests who would do a better job. This, he says, was the Holy Father's response.
Please, Father Giulio, you can keep thinking that you're right, that there will be people better than you, but please, you come. And so I accept it, but I'm still not convinced of why, the reason why. So.
Father Giulio's meditations will focus on the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus in St. Matthew's Gospel. Each day will include Mass, meditations, Vespers, Eucharistic adoration, as well as some free time. While on retreat, all public and private audiences of the Pope are canceled. The retreat ends Friday morning, and Pope Francis and the Curia officials will arrive back here in the Vatican just before noon. In Rome, Mary Shovlin, EWTN News Nightly.
Very good. Thanks to know, Mary. The Holy Father will meet with European Union leaders later this month. The Vatican says Pope Francis will talk to the group a day before a special summit marking the 60th anniversary of the founding of the EU's predecessor, the European Economic Community. Coming up, we'll take you to South Sudan, where people are desperately in need of help. And a timely message from Pope Francis.
De la vanità.
Why fasting helps your neighbor. Welcome back. I'm Jason Calvi in for Lauren Ashburn. The 21st Century Wilberforce Initiative, a group that promotes religious freedom, grades lawmakers on the topic. Of legislators who earned an A, 56% were Republicans, 44% were Democrats. Florida's Marco Rubio was the only senator to receive an A+ in fighting for religious freedom. 13 House members got that same grade, including New Jersey's Chris Smith and David Trott of Michigan. Catholic News Agency shares an in-depth story on this issue right now. Read more at catholicnewsagency.com. The United Nations has declared a famine in the South Sudan, and Pope Francis now says he would like to visit that ravaged country. Joining us now is Neil Corkery, president of the Sudan Relief Fund. Tell us, what are you hearing from your sources in South Sudan right now? They've just been ravaging with a 3-year civil war, and now they're dealing with this famine as well.
Our project director just returned from South Sudan this week. It is a desperate situation there, and it is becoming catastrophic.
People, I mean, what's going on there? I mean, people are...
There's almost 50% of the people are in what the UN describes as a severe food crisis. And the problem is all goes back to this civil war that's been going on there for 3 years now, where the people are unable to plant crops and they've been forced from their homes.
It's incredible to think of war, and then just in the wake of the war, now we still have the war going on, and now the famine. It's one thing after the other in that country. It's incredible. Now Pope Francis says he wants to visit the country along with the head of the Anglican Communion. What would that mean for him to visit?
It actually would mean a huge amount, because the Catholic Church is and the Anglican, to a lesser extent because it's not as big a religion, is the only functioning institution in civil society in the country.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm serious. It's the only functioning institution. The army, the government, everything's broken down. All of society is broken down, and so the church has this power to convene people. The church has the trust and the respect of all people at all parts of society. And so the Pope going there will not only serve to focus international attention on this crisis, but more importantly, to bring the different parties together.
So besides that, what else can Catholics do to help in this terrible situation?
The most important thing is to pray. It is a very difficult situation, this tribal fighting, the civil war. The U.S. government has stepped up their efforts pushing the UN to provide more humanitarian assistance. One of the other things they can do is the church is, as I said, able to get to many of the people that are in more remote areas, and contributing to the church, the Catholic Church on the ground there, is something that we are focused on at the Sudan Relief Fund, specifically in helping.
And that fund is based right here in Washington, D.C.
Right here.
What are you asking from U.S. officials?
We're asking from U.S. officials, again, to pressure the warring factions to come together to get a peace. That's the essential ingredient to solving this famine long term. Secondly, to pressure UN agencies to provide more humanitarian assistance.
Well, we also will certainly be adding our prayers to that endeavor as well. Thank you so much. Neil Corkery from the Sudan Relief Fund. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Pope Francis says true fasting means helping your neighbor. During Mass this morning, the Holy Father said God criticizes hypocrites who fast, but at the same time oppress their workers. Instead, Pope Francis says Christians are called to a true fast, where we are loving and helping our neighbors. Up next, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer agrees to a pinky promise with our Lauren Ashburn. We'll tell you what's on the table, and taking the stress out of pediatric surgery with a pint-sized luxury car. Today we remember one of the few American saints. St. Catherine Drexel was born in Philadelphia back in 1858. She later gave up everything to become a missionary for African Americans and Indians. She founded more than a dozen schools around the United States. Pope John Paul II canonized Catherine Drexel in the year 2000. Welcome back. I'm Jason Calvi in for Lauren Ashburn. And earlier this week, Lauren Ashburn spoke with author Brooks, a prominent social scientist and musician. Brooks is open about his Catholic faith and his deep commitment as a conservative to the poor. He says Catholics should ask themselves every day what they can do for those in need.
The examination of conscience I'm going on a limb here, for the capitalist Catholic is, did my capitalism today serve the people at the margins of society?
Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that that's what capitalist Catholics believe?
I believe that that's what capitalist Catholics
should believe.
And there are days when I don't think about the poor, when I don't think about the unemployed, when I don't think about the marginalized and the depressed and the people who are poor in all sorts of different ways enough. But I want to think about them more, and I want to use everything at my disposal, the tools that I've got, which in America is, leadership and strength and free enterprise and all the reasons that our families came here in the first place for the people who need it the most.
Back to Trump.
Yeah.
He does not want to touch entitlements, and that money is something that could be used, the interest alone that we're paying on that could be used to help the poor.
There are two things to keep in mind. Number one is the safety net is very, very important. And I would actually urge all of my Catholic friends and brothers and sisters to regret anything that slashes safety nets. However, we've been doing safety nets wrong for generations by making people dependent. The philosophy behind it, as we've spent $20 trillion since the beginning of the war on poverty in the 60s, was let's help people more. That's the wrong approach. I want to help people, but what we need to say is more people need to be needed, not more people need to be helped. And that means more opportunity, and the great society has not been very good for opportunity. So that's domestic discretionary spending. You're talking about with the president on entitlements, that's what are we doing that's going to affect future generations? And that's a serious business. Look, it will grow to start to threaten safety nets, to be sure. But the biggest problem that we have is the fairness with which we're treating future generations. Those are our kids and those are our grandkids, and we have a moral obligation to make sure that we're not crowding out their prosperity and their ability to earn their success. What I'm suggesting is that the administration needs to rethink its commitment not to touch entitlements.
Why?
It's very important that we reform entitlement programs because it's not fair what that's going to do to future generations in this country. The greatest threat that we have to the fiscal solvency, the integrity of this country to continue to be able to provide the services that we think are really important, but more importantly, to be able to provide the opportunity to future generations requires that we not run out of money. We need to look at entitlement programs and have plausible, good, sane reforms. And the best person who's looking at this today is our fellow Catholic, Paul Ryan.
But it's not President Trump, and President Trump right now is the one who is calling the shots on all of this.
True.
So how are you, as a person, as an organization, to make change?
My colleagues and I are dedicated to the competition of ideas and making suggestions that work for the American people and indeed for people all around the world. So we don't have the ability to say legislation is going to change. I mean, we're not a political organization. People watching us, some of them are really like President Trump and some of them really don't like President Trump, but we get one president at a time. and our job is to help the president be as successful as possible, and I think that reconsidering some of these ideas will make this administration more successful.
Arthur Brooks, president of AEI, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
The White House press secretary looks forward to meeting Pope Francis, but Sean Spicer tells Lauren Ashburn he's not ready to confirm a meeting between the pontiff and President Trump.
I know that there's been some talk of Donald Trump going to the Vatican. I know that it's not anywhere near solidified.
I think a lot of that talk probably come from
you. I know. Let's go.
I think there's a G20 trip that's in Italy. I've heard the same thing.
Sure.
We have nothing on that, but obviously, whether it was to see the Holy Father or visit the Vatican would obviously be a huge treat. I think there's a lot of things that go into a schedule like this.
I know. My point is to advocate for it because I'd love to join you
and I would
be there.
That makes two of us. But I think there's a lot of others in the White House that,
Sure.
I mean, beyond obviously the spiritual and the religious aspect of it, the Holy Father is a major guiding force in the world, and I think it would obviously, as would be so many of the other heads of state and heads of government, for that to happen. So I will push for that.
So as my kids say, pinky promise, if you go, I'm there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know what that is too.
Okay,
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Sean Spicer.
Pinky promise. Well, President Trump is scheduled to meet other world leaders during the month of May. We'll have to wait and see if he meets Pope Francis. Rolls-Royce is making a unique car, but it's only for special drivers. This is the Rolls-Royce SRH. Young patients at Britain's St. Richard's Hospital Pediatric Day Surgery Unit get behind the wheel. The kids cruise the electric car through the hospital's halls to the operating room. Rolls-Royce says the car helps kids feel less stressed out as they head into surgery. And for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, thanks for joining us. We leave you tonight with a tender moment at the White House. You can see President Donald Trump walking to Marine One with 2 of his grandkids before flying to a Catholic school in Florida. Good night and God bless.